December 24th, 1945. 1 a.m. George Sodder suddenly woke up. Something wasn't right. The smell of smoke was filling the house. Within seconds, flames began spreading through the lower floor. George jumped out of bed and shouted for his family. His wife, Jenny, woke up in panic. Together, they rushed to wake their children. 4 of them managed to escape through the front door. Then George looked toward the second floor. 5 of his children were still inside. They were calling for help. George knew there was only one way to reach them: the ladder. Every night, he kept a ladder beside the house. But when he ran outside, it was gone. Desperate, he rushed to his trucks. His plan was simple: drive one truck next to the house, climb onto its roof, and pull his children out through the upstairs window. He turned the key. Nothing. He tried the second truck. Nothing. Both trucks had mysteriously stopped working. George could do nothing except watch the flames grow stronger. Within minutes, the roof collapsed. The second floor disappeared into the fire. Everyone believed the 5 children were gone forever. But when firefighters searched through the ashes, they made a discovery that shocked everyone. There were no bodies, no bones, no human remains. It was as if the 5 children had never been inside the house at all. And that was only the beginning. Because the deeper investigators looked into the fire, the more impossible the mystery became. The fire had ended, but for George and Jenny Sodder, the nightmare had only begun. As the smoke cleared over the ruins of their home, George searched desperately through the ashes. He expected the worst, but what he found made no sense. There were no human bones. 5 children were believed to have died in the fire. Yet investigators couldn't find a single complete skeleton, not even enough remains to confirm that anyone had actually burned inside the house. George refused to believe it. He knew that even in extremely intense house fires, bones don't simply disappear. Something wasn't right. Then, even stranger discoveries began to surface. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles near the Sodder house before the fire. One witness later claimed they saw several children looking out from a passing car on the night of the tragedy. Another woman said she had served breakfast to 5 frightened children at a roadside diner the next morning. The children were accompanied by 2 unfamiliar adults who refused to let anyone speak to them. Each story sounded unbelievable, but together they painted a chilling possibility. What if the children never died in the fire? What if someone had taken them and used the fire to erase every trace? George became obsessed with finding answers. He hired private investigators. He questioned every official report, and then he uncovered another disturbing fact. The telephone line to the house had not burned in the fire. It had been cut intentionally. A repairman later confirmed that someone had climbed a utility pole and physically severed the wire before the fire even started. That meant whoever was responsible had planned everything in advance. The fire, the missing children, even preventing the family from calling for help. This wasn't looking like an accident anymore. It looked like a carefully planned operation. Then another mystery emerged. The ladder George always kept against the side of the house had vanished. Without that ladder, he couldn't reach the upstairs windows to rescue his children. Even stranger, both of George's trucks suddenly refused to start that night, despite working perfectly the day before. The family had planned to use those trucks to reach the second floor, but they failed at the exact moment they were needed most. Coincidence? Or sabotage? Every new clue pushed George further from the official explanation. Authorities quickly closed the case. Death by fire. End of investigation. But George and Jenny refused to accept it. For years, they continued searching across America, following anonymous letters, interviewing witnesses, and chasing every possible lead. Because deep inside, they believed their children were still alive. And then, nearly 20 years later, a single photograph arrived in their mailbox. No return address, no explanation, only one picture of a young man. On the back, someone had written, "Louis Sodder, one of the 5 missing children." Could this finally be proof that the children had survived? Or was someone playing a cruel game with grieving parents? The mysterious photograph changed everything. Inside the envelope was the picture of a young man in his 20s. On the back, someone had scribbled a cryptic message. Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The handwriting meant nothing to investigators. But to George and Jenny Sodder, it meant hope. They believed the man in the photograph looked remarkably like their missing son, Louis. George became convinced that, after nearly 2 decades, one of his children had finally reached out. He immediately hired another private investigator to trace where the letter had been mailed. But before the investigator could report back, he disappeared. No explanation. No final report. He was never heard from again. For George, the official investigation remained closed. Authorities insisted the children had died in the fire. Yet many experts questioned that conclusion. Some forensic specialists argued that if 5 children had truly perished inside the house, at least some identifiable bone fragments should have remained. Others pointed to the cut telephone line, the missing ladder, the disabled trucks, and the reports of children being seen alive after the fire. None of those questions were ever fully answered. Over time, several theories emerged. Some believed the children had been kidnapped by members of the Italian mafia, possibly connected to George Sodder's outspoken criticism of Benito Mussolini years earlier. Others believed the fire had been carefully staged to cover the abduction. Another theory suggested that witnesses had mistaken other children for the missing Sodder siblings. And of course, some believed the official explanation was correct, that the children tragically died in the flames, and grief simply made the family unable to accept the loss. But even today, no theory explains every piece of evidence. In 1968, George and Jenny placed a giant billboard along Route 16 near Fayetteville. It displayed the photographs of their 5 missing children and offered a reward for information. The billboard stood for years, a silent reminder that the family had never stopped searching. George Sodder died in 1969. Jenny continued wearing black clothes every single day for the rest of her life. Mourning the children she never stopped believing were alive. The billboard remained standing until after her death. Today, more than 80 years after that Christmas Eve fire, the disappearance of the Sodder children remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Were 5 innocent children really consumed by the flames? Or did they vanish into a life that no one ever discovered? Perhaps the truth disappeared with the people who knew it. And somewhere, the answer is still waiting to be found. Sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries are not the ones we solve, but the ones that refuse to give us any answers.